You ever think back to being a kid and all those summer days, like building forts out in the woods and I don't know, just that whole sense of adventure. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
absolutely.
Well, that's kind of what we're diving into today. We're looking at the origins of the Boy Scouts,
Hmm.
and it's a story that really begins not with a campfire,
Right.
but with the
Hmm.
siege of Mafeking during the Second Boer War.
Yeah, it's interesting how, that war, a world away from those kind of carefree summer days you were just talking about,
Yeah.
would actually give birth to one of the most iconic youth movements in history.
Right.
Yeah.
So our main character in all this, Robert Baden-Powell,
Yeah.
can you kind of set the scene for us? Who was he before the siege, before the Boy Scouts?
So Baden-Powell was a British Army officer,
Okay.
born in 1857.
Okay.
By the time he finds himself in Mafeking in 1899,
Okay.
he's already had a pretty solid military career under his belt. He'd
Yeah.
served in India, Afghanistan, and Africa, and really became quite skilled in scouting and reconnaissance,
Uh-huh.
which was a field that was still relatively new at the
Oh,
time.
so he was already an expert in survival and observation,
Yeah.
thinking ahead all that.
Yeah, exactly. And all of those skills would prove to be absolutely crucial during the siege of Mafeking.
Yeah.
So picture this. You've got this small town in South Africa,
Okay.
completely surrounded by Boer forces, outnumbered 8-1.
8-1.
8-1.
That's those are some daunting odds.
Yeah. Yeah, they really were.
Wow.
Baden-Powell was in command of this small garrison facing a much larger enemy force.
Okay.
But here's where his ingenuity comes in. He didn't just rely on his soldiers.
Oh.
He recognized the potential of the young boys in Mafeking.
And this is where we start to see those seeds of the Boy Scouts being planted, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He formed the Mafeking Cadet Corps, enlisting these boys to help with the defense effort.
Hmm.
Now, of course, they weren't fighting on the front lines,
Right.
but they played really crucial support roles.
What kind of tasks were they given?
Right.
What does this tell us about what Baden-Powell saw in these young boys?
Well, they were messengers, carrying vital communications between different parts of the town, sometimes right under the noses of the enemy.
Wow.
They helped build fortifications, they gathered supplies,
Okay.
assisted in the hospital. They were really the eyes and ears of the defense,
Wow.
freeing up the soldiers for combat duties.
It's amazing.
And what Baden-Powell realized was that these boys were not only capable,
Right.
but eager to contribute, and they thrived on the responsibility.
Yeah. So amidst all the chaos and the danger of this siege,
Right.
he sees the resilience, the resourcefulness,
Hmm.
even the spirit of service in these young cadets.
Exactly. And, their contribution wasn't just symbolic.
Right.
It was essential to the town's survival.
Wow.
The siege lasted a grueling 217 days.
Oh my gosh.
And throughout that whole ordeal, the Mafeking Cadet Corps proved their worth time and time again.
That shared experience, facing hardship together, depending on each other.
Right.
That must have really forged a powerful bond between Baden-Powell and those boys.
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
And the successful defense of Mafeking really transformed Baden-Powell into a national hero
Right.
upon his return to Britain in 1900.
I bet.
But his story doesn't end there.
This is just the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, he's a war hero.
Yeah.
But something tells me his greatest legacy is yet to be written.
You're right, and it all starts with a military training manual, Aids to Scouting,
Okay.
that Baden-Powell had written years earlier.
A military manual.
Yeah.
How does that lead to the Boy Scouts?
Well, it's quite a fascinating turn of events.
Okay.
You see, after the siege, Aids to Scouting became a surprise bestseller.
Really?
It wasn't intended for a wide audience,
Okay.
but people, especially youth group leaders,
Hmm.
were drawn to its practical advice on observation tracking survival skills.
Okay.
All those things Baden-Powell had honed during his military career. Yeah.
So they saw the potential to apply these skills beyond the battlefield,
Right.
to use them to kind of prepare young people for the challenges of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for Baden-Powell, this unexpected popularity of his military guide sparked an idea.
Okay.
He'd witnessed firsthand the capability and enthusiasm of those Mafeking cadets.
Right.
And now he's seeing this broader interest in scouting skills.
Yeah.
It was like the perfect storm.
And this leads us to, I guess, a pivotal moment in the story. the Brownsea Island experiment in 1907.
Right.
Can you tell us about this experiment? What was its purpose?
Yeah, so this is where Baden-Powell really put his ideas to the test.
Okay.
He took a group of 20 boys,
Okay.
a mix of working-class boys from a youth organization,
Okay.
and then boys from more privileged backgrounds
Okay.
to Brownsea Island off the coast of England.
Okay.
It was a week-long camp designed to test activities and just kind of gauge the boys' reactions.
So he's almost like a scientist in the lab,
Yeah.
carefully observing, collecting data,
Ex-
refining his hypothesis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were some of the specific activities that he tried out? What was he learning?
Well, he had them practicing first aid building shelters,
Okay.
cooking over open fires, signaling with flags going on night hikes,
Wow.
learning about nature.
Cool.
You know, he wanted to engage them on multiple levels,
Wow.
not just teach them skills, but also foster teamwork,
Yeah.
self-reliance, a
Yeah.
love of the outdoors.
It sounds like he was really creating an experience, not just delivering a lecture.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
And this hands-on approach proved to be incredibly effective.
I bet.
You know, Baden-Powell saw how much the boys enjoyed the activities,
Right.
how quickly they learned, how
Yeah.
they embraced the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
It really solidified his belief that scouting could be a powerful tool for shaping young people.
Yeah.
But he also made some important observations.
Okay.
He realized that his military manual,
Right.
while a good starting point,
Yeah.
needed to be adapted for a younger audience. It was too focused on military tactics
Right.
and didn't fully capture the spirit of adventure and personal growth that he wanted to cultivate.
Okay, so he took what he learned on Brownsea Island
Yeah.
and started reworking his material.
Exactly. He began to distill the essence of his scouting principles. You know, stripping away the military jargon
Yeah.
and focusing on what resonated most with the boys.
Yep.
Practical skills, a sense of adventure, a code of conduct, a spirit of service to others.
Mhm.
And that's how Scouting for Boys was born.
Wow.
Yeah,
We're going to dive into that book, the book that launched a global movement,
right.
in just a moment.
Sounds good.
But first, I think we need to take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
Sounds good. So Scouting for Boys, it wasn't just a how-to guide.
Right.
It was really more like a manifesto for a whole new kind of youth movement.
And it really just took the world by storm, didn't it?
It did.
Tell us about the impact of this book.
It was an instant success.
Wow.
Published in 6 installments, starting in January 1908, each one coming out every 2 weeks.
Okay.
It sold over 10,000 copies per installment.
Wow.
It was translated into dozens of languages.
Wow.
Became one of the best-selling books of the 20th century.
What was it about Scouting for Boys that really captured the imaginations of so many young people? Was it just the practical skills, or was there something more to it?
It was definitely more than just learning how to tie knots and build fires.
Right.
Baden-Powell really tapped into a deeper yearning,
Yeah.
especially among boys growing up in these increasingly urban environments. You know, he offered them a sense of adventure, a connection to nature, a code of honor to live by the Scout oath and law,
Right.
and a chance to be part of something bigger than themselves.
It's interesting you mentioned urban environments. Was there a sense at the time that young people were becoming too soft, too disconnected from the practicalities of life?
I think there was definitely that sentiment at the time.
Yeah.
You know, the Industrial Revolution had led to rapid urbanization.
Right.
And many felt that young people were losing touch with those more traditional values of self-reliance and resourcefulness. So Scouting for Boys, in a way, offered a way to counter this trend,
Right.
to equip young people with the skills and character they needed to thrive in this changing world.
So it really wasn't just about those outdoor skills.
Right.
It was about building character, fostering a sense of responsibility, connecting with something larger than oneself.
Yeah, precisely.
And this message, it resonated far beyond the shores of Britain.
It did.
Within just a few years, Boy Scout organizations were springing up all over the world.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly it spread.
Did Baden-Powell anticipate this kind of rapid growth, or was he caught off guard by just the sheer scale of the movement?
I think even he was astonished by the response.
Wow.
You know, he'd hoped to inspire some local scout groups,
Right.
but I don't think he ever imagined that it would become this global phenomenon.
It's amazing.
But he quickly rose to the challenge. In 1909, he established the Boy Scouts Association
Okay.
to provide some structure and guidance for this rapidly expanding movement.
So from a small experimental camp on Brownsea Island
Right.
to a national organization in just a couple years,
Yeah.
and then spreading globally within a decade.
It's pretty remarkable.
That's quite a legacy.
It is. And while the organization has evolved over the years,
Right.
Those core values of preparedness, resourcefulness, and service to others,
Yeah.
they've really remained at its heart.
Those values do seem timeless. But weren't some of Baden-Powell's views also shaped by, the colonialism of his era?
Right.
How do we kind of reconcile those aspects with a more modern understanding of scouting?
Well, it's true that Baden-Powell's worldview was influenced by the time in which he lived.
Of course.
However, the core principles that he championed, self-reliance, service to others, respect for nature,
Yeah.
those have resonated across cultures and time periods. And the modern scouting movement has made significant efforts to become more inclusive.
Okay. And to address the complexities of a globalized world.
It's fascinating how these seemingly simple principles, rooted in kind of outdoor skills and adventure,
Right.
have had such a broad and lasting impact.
It is.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound ideas
Yeah.
come from the most unexpected places.
Absolutely. And that the spirit of adventure and the desire to make a positive difference are kind of universal human qualities. And I think Baden-Powell really tacked into something fundamental with the Boy Scouts.
So what does this all mean? Why should we care about the origins of the Boy Scouts today? It
Yeah.
seems like more than just a historical curiosity.
Well, the Boy Scouts emerged from a very specific set of circumstances.
Right.
The rise of imperialism, anxieties about modern life, a yearning for adventure.
Yeah.
But the core values that Baden-Powell championed, preparedness, resourcefulness, service to others,
Yeah.
I mean, these transcend any particular time period.
So even though the world has changed dramatically since Baden-Powell's time,
Right.
those values are still relevant? Absolutely.
Right.
We live in a world facing incredibly complex challenges.
Yeah.
Climate change, social and political divisions, economic uncertainty, and those core scouting principles, being prepared, being resourceful, stepping up to help others.
Right.
I mean, these aren't just about camping and not tying anymore.
Yeah.
These are life skills
Yeah.
that can empower individuals and communities to navigate uncertainty and make a positive difference.
It's almost as if Baden-Powell, without intending to, created this blueprint for resilient living,
Yeah.
for facing the unknown with courage and a commitment to helping others.
Yeah.
The powerful legacy.
It is.
But before we get too carried away with the praise,
Right.
it's important to acknowledge that the Boy Scouts of America in particular has
Yeah.
faced some very real challenges in recent years, haven't they?
Yeah, you're referring to the controversies surrounding their policies on LGBTQ plus inclusion.
Yes. And their handling of sexual abuse allegations.
Yes, those are very serious issues that have understandably shaken public trust in the organization.
They are, and it's important to acknowledge these issues.
Yeah.
And to recognize that any organization,
Right.
no matter how well-intentioned,
Right.
can have blind spots and make mistakes.
Absolutely.
So where does that leave us in terms of the legacy of the Boy Scouts? Does it tarnish the positive aspects of the movement?
That's a complex question.
Yeah.
I think it's important to hold both the positive and the negative in mind.
Okay.
When considering the legacy of any organization or individual,
Yeah.
we can acknowledge the good work that the Boy Scouts have done over the years.
Right.
Instilling values, fostering leadership, promoting community service,
Yeah.
while also holding them accountable
Right.
for the harm that has been done.
That's a fair point.
Yeah,
It reminds us that history is rarely simple or straightforward.
it's true.
There are often layers of complexity, shades of gray competing perspectives.
Exactly. And as we reflect on the origins of the Boy Scouts, it's an opportunity to not only celebrate their achievements, but also to learn from their mistakes.
We'll explore those lessons and the future of the Boy Scouts in our next segment. It's pretty amazing how the Boy Scouts have managed to stay relevant for over a century,
Yeah.
Adapting to all these changing social norms and cultural landscape.
Right.
So how has the organization really evolved while still holding on to those core values?
It's been a balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
One of the most significant changes has been the inclusion of girls in scouting programs.
Right.
For decades, scouting was seen as this primarily male domain,
Yeah.
but that's shifted dramatically.
I remember when that was like a big debate,
Yeah,
whether girls should be allowed to join.
right.
What prompted that change?
I think there is a growing recognition that the values and skills that scouting promotes,
Yeah.
leadership, teamwork, outdoor skills, community service,
Yeah.
I mean, these are equally valuable for girls. And, let's be honest, excluding half the population was never really a sustainable model.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
So how did the organization navigate that transition?
It wasn't always smooth sailing.
I bet.
There was some resistance
Okay.
from some traditionalists who felt that girls' inclusion would kind of dilute the essence of scouting.
Hmm.
But ultimately, I think their organization recognized that to stay relevant,
Yeah.
it needed to adapt.
Right.
And so today, girls are active participants in all levels of scouting, from Cub Scouts to Eagle Scouts.
That's a pretty remarkable shift.
It is.
What other changes have we seen in recent years?
Well, there's been a growing emphasis on environmental stewardship and sustainability.
Okay.
You know, Baden-Powell himself was a nature lover,
Right.
but the early Boy Scouts didn't really focus as much on environmental issues as we do today.
Right, of course.
Now, conservation and sustainability are really woven into the fabric of scouting programs.
That makes sense, given the urgent environmental challenges that we're facing.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the Boy Scouts are also grappling with issues of diversity and inclusion.
Right.
They've made strides in recent years to become more welcoming to LGBTQ plus youth and adults.
Okay.
And they're really working to make scouting more accessible to kids from all socioeconomic backgrounds.
So they're really trying to address some of those blind spots of the past
Yeah.
and create a more inclusive environment for everyone.
They are. It's an ongoing process.
Right.
There's always more work to be done.
Of course.
But it's encouraging to see the organization taking these issues seriously.
Absolutely. So looking ahead,
Yeah.
what do you think the future holds for the Boy Scouts? Will they continue to thrive,
Right.
or are they destined to become a relic of the past?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the Boy Scouts are at a crossroads.
Oh,
They're
no.
facing some real challenges, both
Right.
internal and external.
Right.
You know, declining membership,
Mhm.
changing demographics,
Yeah.
evolving social values.
Right.
All these things are putting pressure on the organization.
But they've proven to be adaptable in the past.
They have.
Yeah.
And I think their ability to evolve and stay relevant
Right?
will really depend on their willingness to continue to adapt,
Yeah.
to embrace change, and to address the needs of a new generation of scouts.
Mm.
If they can do that, I think they have a bright future ahead of them.
It's fascinating to think about how an organization founded over a century ago, rooted in this very specific time and place,
Right.
can still offer such valuable lessons for us today.
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways from our deep dive into the origins of the Boy Scouts?
I think one of the most important takeaways
Yeah.
is that the values that Baden-Powell championed, preparedness, resourcefulness, service to others,
Yeah.
a connection to nature, these are timeless.
They are.
They're just as relevant in the 21st century as they were in the early 1900s.
Right.
And they're not limited to scouting, you know?
Yeah.
These are qualities that can benefit us all.
It's almost like he unintentionally created this blueprint for living a meaningful and impactful life,
Yeah,
regardless of who you are or what path you choose.
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and I think another important lesson is the power of adaptation.
Right.
The Boy Scouts have faced challenges, controversies over the years,
Yeah,
but they've survived by evolving and changing with the times.
absolutely.
It's a good reminder that even the most established institutions need to be willing to change to stay relevant.
Exactly. And I think a final takeaway is the importance of recognizing both the positive and the negative aspects
Right.
of any historical movement or organization.
Yeah.
We can celebrate the good work that the Boy Scouts have done while also acknowledging the mistakes they've made
Right.
and the harm that's been caused.
It's a reminder that history is complex and multifaceted.
It is. And as we reflect on the legacy of the Boy Scouts,
Yeah.
it's an opportunity to learn from both their triumphs and their failures.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the origins of the Boy Scouts.
has.
A story of adventure, resilience, adaptation, and the enduring power of human values.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us today.